Hello and welcome to the Chiaroscuro Jazz Podcasts. I'm George Graham, Director of Artistry and Repertoire for the Venerable Jazz label, celebrating our 50th anniversary and featuring over 100 titles by some of the world's great jazz musicians. This time we feature pianist Bill Charlap, who is one of the most acclaimed pianists in jazz today, specializing in the Great American Songbook. In 2006, Charlap won a Grammy Award for an album of the songs of Jerome Kern, co-produced by Tony Bennett. He's worked extensively with numerous jazz luminaries, including Tony Bennett, Phil Woods — he was a member of the Phil Woods Group for over a decade — Jerry Mulligan, and Benny Carter, to name a few. He also recorded a duet album with his pianist wife, Rini Rosnes. But his first album as a leader was for Chiaroscuro. Recorded in 1993, the album is called Along With Me. Here from the album is On Green Dolphin Street, with Randy Ulau on bass and Ron Vincent on drums. Bill Charlap with On Green Dolphin Street from the Chiaroscuro album, Along With Me. Bill Charlap was pretty much born into music, with both of his parents being prominent musicians. One of the distinctive features of many Chiaroscuro CD releases is the Jazz Speak track, in which the artists talk about themselves and their music in their own words. Here's Bill Charlap on his upbringing.
My name's Bill Charlap, and I'm a jazz pianist living in New York City. My father was Moose Charlap, the songwriter who was most famous for his work on Peter Pan, and he also wrote some songs which were recorded by such people as Joe Williams and Sarah Vaughan. My mother, Sandy Stewart, is a singer, and she worked with such people as Benny Goodman and was on the Perry Como Show, Mitch Miller Show, Gary Moore Show, and has done a lot of studio work recently doing television commercials and stuff. We work together sometimes too. So there was always music in the house. My father passed away when I was 7 years old, and my mother was remarried shortly after to a trumpet player by the name of George Trifon, who was in bands of Benny Goodman as well, and Les Brown, and quite a few others. There was lots of music around the house, and an emphasis on songs, theater music, and that sort of stuff, which was very influential on me as a young person. My career as a pianist pretty much started when I was about 13 years old. I started playing at an acting company on Bond Street. It's an improv company. It took suggestions from the audience, and I had to underscore whatever scene was going on. That was really the first gig that I had. And I had a bunch of groups in high school, played with a gospel choir, and there were lots of musicians around, and a certain very healthy competitiveness with kids who were very advanced. There were some kids I went to school with who I still play with to this day, like John Gordon, who is one of the great young alto saxophone players, in my opinion, in the world. He was great back then, and we started a group together near the end of high school, which had one of the bass players that's featured on this album, Sean Smith. I studied with some pretty important teachers for me at that time. There's a man by the name of Jack Riley, whose music and teaching still inspires me today, and a woman by the name of Eleanor Hancock, who was a great concert pianist and taught me a lot about sound and technique at the piano. Those were my most important teachers. But at the same time, Dick Hyman, who was a distant cousin of mine, heard me play when I was about 16 years old. I went over to his house. I was terrified, and I played for him, and he was kind enough to call me up every now and then and say, well, I'm doing this recording date here, or I'm doing this concert here, why don't you come along with me? And so that was really another kind of tutelage. Though it wasn't formal study, it was just as valuable, and I was able to learn quite a lot by seeing one of the pros of all pros work in all different kinds of situations. Since then, I've been honored and privileged to be able to play with Dick quite a lot. Another pianist who was very helpful to me and influential is Bill Mays, a great pianist who lives in New York City, who also shared a lot of himself with me as a musician. He was somebody who I hung around and saw in many different situations, and I learned a lot by kind of being on the sidelines and watching him take care of business. At the time I met Bill, he was playing with Jerry Mulligan and doing some other projects at the time. He wasn't able to continue on a steady basis with Jerry, so I was fortunate that Bill recommended me, and I ended up playing with Jerry for about 2 years, which was a great learning experience and great pleasure for me. He's a musician who's very influential to my concept. He has a truly original melodic gift and thinks like an arranger, which he is, of course, but I learned a lot from that, from being around his musical energy.
Now here's more from Bill Charlap's album, Along With Me, a solo performance of Alec Wilder's I'll Be Around. Bill Charlap with I'll Be Around from his debut Chiaroscuro album, Along With Me. The pianist is also represented on several other Chiaroscuro releases, including the Jerry Mulligan Songbook Project, which we spotlighted in a previous podcast, and also recordings with Phil Woods, a trio with guitarist Gene Bertoncini and bassist Sean Smith, Sean Smith's own live album. He appeared with bassist Jay Lenhart with his Great Duets album, and with John Gordon on his album Spark. Let's hear Bill Charlap playing with Phil Woods on the album Voyage, doing the title piece, featuring Willie Jones III on drums and Peter Washington on bass. Then from the album Gene Bertoncini with Bill Charlap and Sean Smith, we'll hear My Funny Valentine. Bill Charlap with guitarist Gene Bertoncini and bassist Sean Smith with My Funny Valentine, preceded by Bill Charlap with Phil Woods and Voyage with Willie Jones III on drums and Peter Washington on bass. Now here's more from Bill Charlap's Jazz Speak.
This album features some of the work I like to do as a leader in a variety of contexts. The duo tracks on this record are with Sean Smith. Sean is probably my deepest musical relationship with one of my peers. We really grew up together musically and as people, and we have a great trust that exists in our duo that I really have almost exclusively with Sean in the way that it is. So I'm very proud to offer some of our efforts here. He is not just a fine bassist, but also a fine composer. One of his compositions is featured on this album, which is called Has This Song Been Written For You Before?, which he wrote for his mother, Patty. I first played with Ron Vincent with Jerry Mulligan. Since then, Ron and I have played a lot together. He played when I was doing about a 5-week stint with my mother at Michael's Pub. And we started to play together in a trio context, and he's a very sensitive accompanist and soloist and really gives a lot to the music. I'm very proud of his work on this CD. I Was Telling Her About You is a song that was written by my father, Moose Charlap. That's a tune that was recorded by Joe Williams and Nancy Wilson and a host of others. Also, I just recorded it with my mother, which is a particularly heartfelt rendition for me and for her. It also features my stepfather on trumpet on there and my brother, who is a fine bassist. Ron Vincent rounds out the group on drums.
Let's close out with a song from Along With Me, I Was Telling Her About You. Bill Charlap from his debut album as a leader, Along With Me, on Chiaroscuro Records, with Andy Ulau on bass and Ron Vincent on drums. Bill Charlap appears on at least 6 Chiaroscuro albums as leader or sideman. For more information, go to chiaroscurojazz.org, where you can find a searchable database of the artists on the label. The music is available on CD, as a download, and streaming on Spotify. And you can listen to continuous jazz from the over 100 albums available on Chiaroscuro 24 hours a day on the Chiaroscuro channel, available at the new and improved Chiaroscuro website. This is George Graham. Thanks for joining us for this Chiaroscuro podcast, and join us next time for more music from great jazz musicians.